So well, I'll introduce myself. Essentially, I work as a custodian at Castell. So Castell is a site that is run by Cadw. For those of you who aren't aware, Cadw basically look after historical monuments from castles to abbeys to houses to even Roman ruins here in Caerleon, where I live actually. So Cadw actually means keep in Welsh, and that is keep as in preserve rather than the keep castles keep. So our particular castle, Castell Coch, is one of the smaller, but also one of the busiest tourist attractions under the ownership of, under the protection of Cadw. So it consists of 3 towers situated on top of a hill in the middle of a woodland, just to give context, and that is in the north of Cardiff. So as one of you have already mentioned, it comes with its nicknames as well. So one of those nicknames is the Fairy Tale Castle, because it is magically lit up in the on the hillsides to a couple of the main roads, including the M4. But also it's I don't like this word, but some people consider it a folly. Mostly because a lot of people remember its history as a Victorian rebuild. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about why that's not strictly true today, because it's actually built on quite an important medieval ruin as well. So dating all the way back to 1066, some of you may be aware that William the Conqueror invaded England successfully, and he was very quick to lay siege on lands to basically gain power in the whole of England. The year after that, he set focus on Wales. Obviously, the Welsh rebelled absolutely not a problem. The Welsh rebelled against the English, so he found it necessary to name some of his allies lords of the lands. So the lord of the land that we're speaking of in Cardiff was given to one of his kinsmen called Robert Fitzhamon. So he was appointed the very first Lord of Glamorgan, and he built several hill forts around the important area of Glamorgan to make sure that the lands were protected, one of which was at Castell Coch. So at Castell Coch, this particular this particular castle would have been a Motte and Bailey castle. So a Motte and Bailey castle, for those of you who aren't aware, would have been a mound of earth with a little structure where they'd have buildings on the outside of that mound. So this particular Motte and Bailey at Castell Coch also had a dry moat circling around it. Moats typically would have been filled with water, but this one, being situated at the top of a hill, wouldn't have been able to have water. So there's no historical evidence that it ever would have had water. And those of you who have visited the site, you can see at the back of the castle there's a bank going down the hillside as well. So water would have just drained away. So at this time, the structure would have been made of wood. So none of this wooden bit is surviving to this day. However, the mound, dating back to the 11th century, and the dry moat, as I say, is still existent of that period. So a couple of hundred years later, an ancestor of Robert Fitzhamon, the first Lord of Glamorgan, called Gilbert de Clare, who was a very important Norman lord in the whole of the Glamorgan region. He also built Caerphilly Castle, which is a very close castle to Castell Coch. He clad the castle in stone. So he built 3 towers, which I mentioned before, as a Norman castle. So nothing like it would look like now, which I'll describe later on to you. So this castle that was built by Gilbert de Clare would have been not necessarily an important structure. but more of a hill fort to defend the nearby more important lands. So those areas would be Caerphilly, which I mentioned before, but also Cardiff. The castle completely oversees the whole of the lands of Cardiff, being situated on top of a hill. So it would have been a really good vantage point to see what's happening in the lands. So through history, in general, castles in England, Scotland, Wales became less and less important. Stone was taken away for various other builds. There's a word called, some of you might be aware, but there's a word called slighting. So slighting is the purposeful taking away of stonework from a castle or any other important building so that it can't be lived in, essentially. So that would have been mostly during the English Civil War, where the parliamentarians were trying to demolish, essentially, the royalists' buildings so that they can't be lived in. So eventually, through history, it brings us to the 18th century when the lands passed into the Bute family. So the Butes weren't actually a Welsh family, they were a Scottish family. So they descended all the way back to Robert the Bruce of Scotland, who famously won the Battle of Bannockburn in Scotland against the English. So the Butes were a very important family in Wales because they acquired through marriage some of these lands, including the land at which Castell Coch is situated. And they actually built Cardiff docks. So this meant that it brought a lot of wealth into the family, as well as all the lands that they previously had inherited. And that left, by the time of the third Marquis, who I'll be getting onto in a second, who was the gentleman who actually had Castell Coch rebuilt. So the third Marquis, as I say, had inherited a lot of wealth and a lot of land. He had so many interests and was an incredibly interesting gentleman. He had interest in astronomy, astrology, religion, nature, history, linguistics, but most importantly for this particular conversation, architecture, and mostly medieval architecture. So not just British architecture, that is, also European architecture. So all of this inspiration led him to work together with a very eccentric architect called William Burgess to recreate, or redesign rather, Castell Coch. So first things first, he had the site excavated. So in 1850, the site was excavated to see what they're working with. So by this point, all of the ruin was, there wasn't a great deal of stonework left. All of the ruin had vegetation overgrowing it. So all of the rubble and vegetation was dug up. And once this was all dug up, they could see what they're working with. And they found that the three basements to the, I'll show you the website in a second, actually. The three basements, which were still existent, were actually safe enough to support any further building. So they went ahead with the project, which was not something that was done very, very frequently. Normally at this stage, when you come across a ruin, you work with preserving exactly what you've got. But this was a very different situation. They decided to rebuild on top of the ruin. Not something that we would do very commonly today, I might add. So with this redesign, so I just got some notes here just to prompt me. He made, again, the three towers. So existent to this day, we have the Keep Tower. So the Keep Tower is the home of extremely lavishly decorated rooms, such as a grand banqueting hall, a beautiful drawing room, and Lord and Lady Bute's bedroom. We have the Kitchen Tower just to the well, in the corner of the site, and that is home to the kitchen, as you probably would be able to guess, but also the children's bedrooms. So you've got the four children of Lord and Lady Bute, eldest of which Lady Margaret, and her bedroom is actually named after her, Lady Margaret's bedroom. And also that this tower had a live-in nanny as well to make sure that they're looking after the children. The last tower is the Well Tower. Not a great deal of decoration in that tower, to be honest, but that is mostly because it wasn't actually completed. Eventually they lost interest, which I'll mention in a second. So regarding the decoration in the castle, as I say, the Keep Tower is the mostly decorated one, and on some of its walls you have depictions of animals, so really drumming home his interest in nature. So you've got Aesop's fables, such as the hare and the tortoise, the stork and the fox, and the dog and his reflection. I tell you what, after this meeting, if those of you who would like to see pictures of these, I can find images that I can send across. I haven't got any to show you right now. I didn't want this to be reliant on images. I just wanted to, but we can have any questions at the end, of course, anyway. So there's also flowers decorating in the drawing room, for instance, and those flowers at first glance looks like a beautifully decorated on the walls. But when you look into this, so this is something that one of my past colleagues did some research into. They're actually reflecting the secret Victorian language of flowers. So the location of each flower in the room is actually speaking about the portrait that it's situated under. So a massive level of detail and design went into this room. Inside the room, you've got portraits of all of the family, all of the ancestors of the third Marquis of Bute. So, for instance, underneath the portrait of his father, there's a flower that essentially means lies and deceit. Not necessarily because he thought that his father was a liar or deceitful, but it was more the fact that his father worked with a lot of difficult people in his line of work, building the Cardiff docks. So that's just a little nod to him, really. The castle is also home to many secret stairs and secret doorways, one of which is inside the drawing room as well. So these would have been used by the servants to the family. So all of the important people, so the lords and his guests, would have used the main stairways, and the servants would have used these intricate, not very visitor-friendly staircases inside the walls, so that they wouldn't meet in the stairways. The Lady Bute's bedroom, so Lord Bute's wife, he looked after her. His own bedroom is very, very small. However, his wife's bedroom, although it's at the top of a very, very tall tower, which doesn't sound very nice, it has a beautifully domed ceiling with beautiful flowers and pomegranates and monkeys decorating the ceiling. So the pomegranates are a little joke from William Burgess, as they're associated with fertility, and the monkeys are reflecting a little message to the playful side of Lord and Lady Bute. Lord Bute and Burgess, but Lady Bute wasn't very fond of the monkeys because they're a little too playful for her. I think she actually wanted them gone, to be honest, but they do look beautiful, so I can understand why they weren't. So sadly, William Burgess actually passed away in 1881 after catching a chill working on Castell. Tragically, he only actually saw the one room, the banqueting hall, completed. But work carried on following all of his designs, and that's why the rooms still look in keeping with his design work. Eventually, Lord Bute lost interest, and that is why the Well Tower, as I mentioned before, isn't actually completed. But it wasn't just the building of the tower that happened at Castell. It was also a very interesting place where they made wine. You wouldn't have thought that Wales making wine is a very a popular choice. But essentially, he sent his gardener to France to study the making of wine. His gardener, Mr. Pettigrew, came back with a couple of vines, and he planted it in the hills next to Castell. So the wine production was not very successful in its first year, but in its second and third years, it actually got a decent yield and proved popular for some, unpopular for others. So in one magazine, they reviewed the wine and said that it took 4 people to drink a bottle of Castell wine, 2 to hold the victim down, and 1 to pour it down his throat. So that reflects what it probably tastes like, not quite like that southern French wine. Eventually, this wine production stopped at the start of the First World War because of understandable sugar shortages, and it never came back. So it's actually home to a golf course now. So yeah, very different uses for that area. So that brings us to the history today. So today, eventually in 1950, the 4th Marquess of Bute handed the castle over into state care. So this would have been the Ministry of Works. So although the family technically still own the castle, it's leased and looked after by Cadw. So Cadw took it over from 1984. Our job is to essentially protect and preserve what is still existent, making sure that everything is still left the way it was from 1950 when it was passed over to the Ministry of Works. So part of my job and part of my colleagues' jobs is to go around and report any potential damage, any potential issue, to make sure that it's getting exactly the care that it needs. So as I mentioned at the start, it is actually a very popular tourist attraction in Wales, and tens of thousands of people visit it every year. It's used for weddings, it's used for events, and also filming. So some of you may be aware of things that have been filmed at Castell, some of you maybe not. There was a 1950s film, I think it was 1950s or 1960s, called The Black Knight, starring Alan Ladd. And also, more recently, it's been home to a couple of episodes of Bargain Hunt and a couple of episodes of Doctor Who as well. So regarding its most recent history, in 2018, we noticed that there was a lot of the decoration in most of the keep towers. Decoration was starting to basically very much deteriorate. Some of the decoration falling off the walls, crumbling away, and obviously this is very, very much not ideal. So it was reviewed what might be happening, and essentially they found that there was a lot of water ingress. So the best way to address this was they built a scaffolding tower surrounding the whole of the keep tower, and they took the chimney stacks off stone by stone. And bear in mind, there are quite a lot of chimneys on Castell, not just 3. Some of them have 4 or 5 per tower. Each stone was labelled up, brought all the way down to the bottom, and placed very carefully so that it will be able to be put back. And they put waterproofing inside the chimneys to address the water ingress, and then they put the chimney stacks back. So now we're at a stage that we're monitoring, making sure that that tower's drying out, and then later on, once we're certain that all of the water ingress has stopped, then the important job of replacing the decoration will go ahead. Currently, the castle's actually having another scaffolding tower around the well tower this time, because we've noticed water ingress in there. It's not quite as much of an issue as it was in the keep tower, because, as I say, the well tower hasn't actually got that much decoration in it, but it's still sad to see some of the walls being blown out by water and so on and so forth. So that's another project that they're doing now. They're going to basically waterproof the tower. And that's a project that, as I say, is literally starting right now. And fingers crossed that will be addressed. So yeah, that pretty much sums up a brief history of the castle and what's happening now. Is there anyone who's got any questions at all? Any further information that they'd like me to expand on? I don't know if anyone would like to ask any questions or anything. No? Okay. So yeah, as I saw that someone had messaged, what's your website, and that you'd like a couple of other images. I'm more than happy to email them over. As I said, we're Cadw, so there's a website for Cadw where we've got information not just on Castell, but there's information about all of the monuments that we look after. So there are 25, give or take a couple, staffed sites that you can go and visit, and countless other sites that are open for you to visit. On the website, you can also buy guidebooks. So this is a Castell guidebook, and inside that you can see there is a lot of information in there, along with pictures. So that's Lord Bute's bedroom, a picture of that one there that you can see. Ooh. So that's one of the rooms that was affected by some of the water ingress. And there's also a tour that you can read inside the castle, which is extremely descriptive of each and every room that you've got. So yeah, these are £4.95 on the Cadw website, and as I say, you can purchase those if you wanted to from on there. So are you sure that no one's got any questions? I appreciate that it was only half an hour, but yeah.
I'd just like to say Diolch yn fawr.
What was that, sorry?
I'd just like to say Diolch yn fawr.
Oh, thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Croeso. Yeah, we do try our best to speak Welsh all the time. I'm not a fluent speaker, but I'm learning. But many of my colleagues are fluent speakers, so we try our best to.
It was one of my lockdown projects.
Oh, really?
So I'm still trying. So I'm sorry if the accent, but the pronunciation was off.
It was brilliant. Yeah. So Welsh is actually so if you consider English a language that is, I've heard, easy to start off, and it just gets harder and harder and harder. So you've got, for example, you got through, though, all of those words that are really, really difficult to pick up. But Welsh, it's almost the opposite. It's really difficult to start learning because so many of the Welsh alphabet, so much of the Welsh alphabet has quite difficult ways of saying it. Like for Castell, you've got sh, and you've got the Coch, you've got the ch is another letter, this sound. But once you've picked that up, it just gets easier and easier and easier. Unfortunately, I'm still at the bottom, so I'm still picking up all those sounds. But eventually, I'll get to the top of that pyramid, hopefully.
Thank you.
I'm trying to learn Welsh, but I've got stuck at the moment. It's a little bit hard.
Yeah,
trying to remember that you miss out this and you add that. Oh, crumbs.
It helps working with Welsh-speaking colleagues, to be honest, and greeting on a daily basis, greeting people bilingually, because that's obviously as part of the Welsh government, which Cadw is. It's important that we promote the Welsh language. But so it does help me. But I've heard a lot of fluent Welsh speakers, people who went to a Welsh language school, because they're not using it daily, they're just losing it. Like my father-in-law, for instance, he used to speak fluent Welsh, but he doesn't use it all the time. So he's basically lost all of it, unfortunately. So yeah.
In the oh crumbs, you go through the main doorway, for want of a better word, the gates.
Yeah.
And just on the left-hand side, near the kitchen, there was, when I went, a video for people, a video stand, VDU, for people who, like me, are in a wheelchair, so couldn't get around. Is it still there? And can you describe it a bit more, please?
Absolutely. So, firstly, unfortunately, it is very unfortunate, but Castell isn't the most mobile friendly site, as you probably would be aware. So Cadw have done what they can to make it accessible as possible, and that is including there's in the courtyard on ground floor. There's a projection essentially, which has 3D panoramics of all of the rooms upstairs. It gives a bit of a history of the castle as well, and has conversations between Lord Bute and William Burgess as well. So that is one of the things that we do have in place. We also have a ramp which goes into the base of the well tower as well, so you can see a 3D model of Castell as well, so you can see exactly what you're inside essentially. But yeah, in general, it is a shame. But even the drawbridge to Castell it's quite a steep gradient. So if you are thinking of visiting Castell, then get in contact with us, and we'll try to provide you as much information as possible so that you can assess whether it's whether it suits your needs or not. I will mention that if any of you are thinking of visiting, a disabled admission is actually free of charge anyway, and that is alongside a companion as well. So if you're only able to see X amount of the site, then we'll make sure that you're looked after, but also you are free of charge anyway. Anything else you want me to expand on?
I just love the place. I wanted to live there because it is so beautiful, and it's so tiny that you can get around, but I couldn't get into anywhere.
Yeah, I honestly, I do apologize for that. I mean, the nature of the castle, as you say, is so small that even if Cadw looked into installing lifts, there simply wouldn't be the space for it. That's why it is great that we have got the panoramic, so that you can see exactly what is upstairs. And obviously, us working at the castle, we're a knowledgeable crew. So if you've got any questions about what is upstairs and the history, then not just us as custodians working behind the tills and working up on site, but we've also got a lovely group of volunteers which are more than happy to do an ad lib talk to you or anything like that.
Thank you. I had a question.
Just open it. Okay, I'll look into that. It might be. So I've seen someone said I've had a look at the access guide and I couldn't see information about the panoramic. It's possible that it's worded differently on the website, but if it isn't on the website, then I'll mention it for them to look into. We don't as custodians, we don't actually do anything on the website, but we've got a team that do update the website, and if that's something that we can add, then we'll certainly look into that.
Another thing it doesn't mention on the website is whether or not you have hearing loops at the pay point and in the shop.
We do have hearing loops. We do, yeah. We have those available. We also have audio guides available. We have found that some people who are hard of hearing have still been able to use them, because they're not quite like most audio guides that you may have come across. We actually get quite a lot of good feedback regarding them, because they're little devices that you pop to your ear. You can adjust the volume on them. Some people can't use them, but those that can't, we make sure that the information that they're missing out on, of course, we would relay to them anyway. But that's something that we have as well.
Yeah, the audio goes. Those are the ones with headphones.
So you can have headphones.
Do you have any hearing loops that you can actually loop around your head and get the hearing aids to pick up? That's the thing I use whenever I've got an audio guide. I actually carry a spare loop in the car, so that I've got some, I can plug it in when places are not accessible.
That would be
They're not that expensive, about £15 retail.
Okay,
for something to plug in.
I'll certainly mention that. We've got hearing loops at the admissions desks in the shop, like you say, though. So that at least is for that situation. But like you say, if we had those at hand for people to travel around with the audio guide, then yeah, that obviously would be massively beneficial to for those situations. Yeah. Thank you.
How do people get when they're upstairs? Because I couldn't go into the rooms at all. All I could do was look. And then the rest of my group decided they were going to commandeer the video because they found it a lot more interesting than going around by themselves.
Okay.
How do you get from the rooms to rooms? Is there a hallway running a circular route or what?
So we recommend a route around, which is described not only by the audio guide, but also there's arrows dotted around the castle as well to help the flow of visitors, and also to make sure that that rooms aren't missed out. So as soon as you enter the castle, for those who are able, there's a stairway inside the courtyards that you would access the banqueting hall first of all. So you'd visit the whole of the keep tower and then move on the first floor to the well tower, and then finally to the kitchen tower. Then you'd come down the same staircase that you came down, that you went up previously, and then visit the ground floor bits. So that would be the medieval basements, and of course our gift shop as well. We got down on that floor as well, and our lovely tea room, which I must mention. We have got a lovely tea room on site, which those of you who are able to visit, then you're more than welcome to, and it's very, very lovely in there. It's a third party company that run it at the moment, but yeah, it's a very nice place to visit.
Is the tea room accessible? I think I remember going to the gift shop, but that was on level access. But is the tea room also accessible?
So it is. There's 4 steps, and then you're in the tea room. So if you are able to manage just those 4 steps, there is a handrail as well. But another limitation that we've got is the fact that the corridors, even the corridor to the tea room, they are fairly narrow. So for wheelchair access, if it's a wide wheelchair, then you'd be limited to go in there. However, you are more than welcome to sit in the courtyards and have them take teas and coffees to you as a takeout coffee, and you can absorb the castle around you from the seating in the courtyard then.
Do you have ramps so that you could get down those 4 steps?
We don't in place at the moment. Mostly because the steps of the tea room. I'm trying to describe this as well as I can. The steps of the tea room meet the bottom of the staircase to the upper rooms of the castle. So unfortunately, if we did have a ramp, even if it was one that we could move away, it would make a trip hazard for the other staircase in the castle. It's just a very, very awkward angle there. But that's why we're more than happy to have takeouts or anything like that. If you need assistance with transporting drinks, then the tea room is more than happy to help. And I think I saw someone just wrote the messages. They're covering in the courtyard. The main part of the courtyard, there isn't covering. You're covered by the wind because you've got walls surrounding you. But there are, I'm trying to remember how many, 6, I think. There are 6 sheltered alcoves with seating in them as well. And that is on the ground floor. So that is sheltered. So generally, even if it's raining, I mean, we had, what was it, the day before yesterday, we had torrential rain, and our visitors were able to sit in the alcoves and they were unaffected by the rain. So it wasn't an issue for them. Any other questions? No. Okie dokie. Well, yeah, thank you for listening to me. Hopefully you've enjoyed that and it's been a bit informative for some of you. I know that I focus a lot on the history. That's just my interests, to be honest. Mostly the medieval history I'm interested in, so hopefully I didn't go too heavy on that. But nonetheless, the main thing I wanted to address really was it's not the folly that everyone calls it. It's actually got a rich history, and it's not just Lord Bute's Lego set, as some people call it.
Thank you so much, James. It's really interesting to learn all about the history. So thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Can you explain well, I know it, but others wouldn't, the meaning of Castell Coch and why it was called that, please?
I most certainly can. What an excellent question. So you may know the answer to this, but you may not know the answer to this. So it's for the earliest documentation of Castell Coch, it was called, my Latin isn't great, but Castel Rubium. Some of you are probably better at pronouncing that than me, which means red castle. So Castell Coch in Welsh actually means red castle. So it is called red castle for one of two reasons. One is the fact that it was used, the stone that was used to build the castle has got a red tint to it. So that's the one that people most commonly feel is the reason that it's called the Red Castle. But Gilbert de Clare, who I mentioned earlier on in the talk, he was a Norman knight who had long ginger hair, and he was nicknamed the Red Earl. So we actually think that it's possibly because the Red Earl built it that it was actually called the Red Castle. So yeah, great question.
That's what I remember being told.
What, the Red Earl?
Both. So, fascinating.
It's really good.
Thank you.
That's my pleasure. My pleasure. I love talking about the castle. Fantastic. So yeah, as I say, thank you so much for listening. And yeah.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Nice to meet
Bye.
you.